So I'm happy to present Sandra Chow, who is an awesome teacher with the Toronto District School Board, and she is passionate about using technology and teaching math in her classroom. She's from a very unique school called Joyce Public School in Toronto. They're award-winning, and they have an incredible group of staff who are really dedicated to bringing technology and meaningful math programs to their students. It's great that so many people are here from all over Ontario to join us as we listen to Sandra's incredible presentation. And I've been through it. I've gone through this presentation with Sandra this afternoon, and it is jam-packed full of resources and ideas for you. The one thing that Sandra and I would like you to think about as we're going through, as Sandra is talking about some of these great tools that are available for your students, I will be putting those tools in the chat, but don't feel that you need to be writing them down really quickly, because in the next couple of days, OTS will be sending you an email with all of the resources. We have listed all of the resources into a document, and that will definitely be shared with you. So we'd rather you participate in the learning rather than feverishly jotting down all the links. So we will definitely be sending those links out to you, and you're going to really enjoy it. So I'm just going to hand it over to you now. There you go, Sandra.
Thank you. So just to start off, I was just curious how many of you were in my part 1 session. If you were in my part 1 session, you can just put a check mark so I can get an idea. So we're at about 19 people right now. Does everyone know how to get to the check marks? Just wanted to make sure. So just under your name, you should see a check mark, and then if you can just click yes or no. Okay, so there's a few people. So Molly already shared a little bit about myself, but I'm just going to go and introduce a little bit more. I am a teacher at Toronto District School Board, and I also spent about 4.5 years in Taiwan, where I also taught at an international school there. I'm a certified trainer and innovator with Google, as well as Smart Exemplary Educator. So I do really like using technology a lot, and you can just see how excited my students are when we do use technology. This was just an example of us using Google Hangout and connecting with another person who codes, and they were just really excited, so they were taking a picture. So I'm really excited to share with you tonight, just to get a better idea of where everybody else is from. If you can just type into the panels here where you are from, which some of you already indicated, but we have some new joiners, and then what panel you teach in, so whether it be primary, junior, intermediate, senior, or with what teaching assignment you're in, and then why perhaps you joined today. So I see primary, junior. And especially those of you who joined part 1, why you decided to join part 2 as well. That would be great. So we have a mixture of some primary, junior, some intermediate. I'm on mat leave too. And I'm actually on mat leave, and I was teaching in a junior grade. Well, great to see that there's some people taking math, this math course to prepare for next year. And so throughout this session, my goal is to have it to be interactive. So if there are any questions along the way, please do put in your questions in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. And today's session will have a lot of time where I want to hear from all of you and your ideas in math as well. Okay, so some people using iPads. Great, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Please do continue to put your thoughts in the chat as we move forward. I'm just going to move to the next slide. So just to give you an idea of what we'll be covering today, I will revisit the SAMR model as kind of a pedagogy in terms of how we input technology into our classroom. So I'll revisit that. Then we'll also look at some tools that we use for minds-on investigation and assessment. So a little bit about the three-part math lesson, but how these different technology tools apply in the different parts of the three-part math lesson. And then rather than focusing on consolidation, I thought I would focus a little bit more on assessment and how we can use technology in the assessment tools. So that's just kind of a capture of what we're doing today. I thought I'd share a little bit about my journey and just how I got into using all this technology in math. So I've always loved teaching math. As a kid, I've always loved math. And when I first joined TDSB, there was an input of initiatives from the ministry for early years numeracy, and I became the lead teacher in math. And for the early years numeracy. And I focused a lot on hands-on problem solving with students in our school, did a lot of focus on how we can use manipulatives and problem solving and using open-ended questions in our classroom. And that was about when smartboards started to come in. And we piloted smartboards, and it revolutionized how we taught and showed the students how to teach mathematics. They learn mathematics, because even with a protractor, being able to blow up the protractor tool so big was just amazing for us. And then in about 2007, I went to Taiwan, and I continued to use smartboards and continue with the practice that I had learned in Toronto. I found that my learning had kind of plateaued, and it wasn't until I came back to Canada in 2013 from Taiwan and went into Joyce again that things started to change for me. Our class had received a grant because my colleague had put in a grant for one-to-one class laptops into our classroom. So we had a one-to-one classroom environment, and we started using Google Apps for Education at that point. And I started co-teaching with my colleague, and that is when my practice drastically changed, and it was about that time that we started learning about the SAMR model, and so a lot of what I'm sharing today is a fruit of all of that collaboration with the teachers that I had, and you can see a snapshot of some of the teachers I was working with, including Chris Lee, Nicole Huang, and Ria Pereira-Foyle. So we had a great crew of teachers that we were learning from each other and exploring how we can use technology effectively. And so just looking at the SAMR model, Molly's going to put in a link for a video. This one's different from the one that I put in part one, and it's a little bit longer. It's about 4 minutes, but this was done through Common Sense Media, and if you don't know Common Sense Media, they do a lot of really, really great videos that relates to all sorts of things, including digital literacy. But in this case, this one's related to the SAMR model, and they do a really great job explaining it. So if you can just take a few moments and watch that.
Sandra, I don't have the link for that. Let me just go and get it from your presentation. We didn't mention that this afternoon. Just let me just look at it.
Yeah, sure. I'll grab that. Yeah, I'll put that in right now. So there it is.
Yeah, it's not showing up in the presentation for some reason. Oh, here, I got it. Sorry.
Yeah, so go ahead and...
Let me just put it, sorry,
Yeah, I put it in already. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll just put it in the web tour.
Every day, teachers are designing activities to target higher order thinking skills in order to engage students in rich learning experiences. But integrating technology adds a whole new layer to teaching and learning. How can technology transform your learning design? Dr. Ruben Fuentedura developed the SAMR model as a way for teachers to evaluate how they are incorporating technology into their instructional practice. You can use SAMR to reflect upon how you are integrating technology into your classroom. Is it an act of substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition? Dr. Fuentedura likens his model to moving up a ladder. The model includes a dotted line that represents the threshold where you shift from using technology to enhance learning to using it to transform learning. Transforming learning promotes higher order thinking skills, such as analyzing, evaluating, and creating, which are essential to Common Core state standards in 21st century learning. So, how can you teach above the line? Let's take a look at an example of a classroom task and how it evolved through the lens of SAMR. In Substitution, technology acts as a direct tool substitute with no real functional change to the task. For example, take creative writing. What if you had students write a story using a word processing program? In this case, students are substituting a handwritten story for a typed story. The task is the same with no real change in student engagement. In augmentation, technology still substitutes, but with some functional improvement. What if you took the same creative writing assignment and had students use a word processing program? They could use features such as spell check and tools for formatting. Again, the story writing task is the same, but the technology augments it with enhanced productivity. In modification, technology should allow for significant task redesign. Take the same creative writing assignment and have students use Google Docs to write their stories. Students can then share these stories with peers and provide real-time feedback. Here, technology has significantly modified the original task by introducing the benefits of student collaboration. At the top stage, Redefinition, technology allows for the creation of entirely new tasks that were previously inconceivable. What if students transform their written stories into multimedia production? After creating storyboards, students film scenes, edit clips, and add music. They can publish the videos and receive feedback from voices across the globe. In this case, technology redefines the story writing task to include media creation, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. So, how can you use SAMR to reflect upon transforming your design? Fuentedura offers reflection questions to help you move up the SAMR ladder and shift how you are designing learning experiences. For instance, ask yourself, what will I gain by replacing the older technology with the new technology? Have I added an improvement to the task process that could not be accomplished with the older technology at a fundamental level? Does this modification fundamentally depend upon the new technology? How is the new task uniquely made possible by the new technology? These are just a few of the questions you can ask yourself as you evaluate the design of a classroom task, and consider that not all technology integration is created equal. Ultimately, SAMR can help you evaluate your use of technology and design tasks that target higher order thinking skills, engage students in rich learning experiences, and impact student achievement.
So just check mark if you had heard of SAMR model before. Okay, I still see some people not putting check marks or X's. Just want to double check everybody knows how to access the check marks under your name, so you can put yes or no. Okay? Yeah, that's better. I'm seeing more now. Great. So this is just another visual of what the SAMR model looks like, and I showed this in part 1, but I really, really like it in that it really visualizes for me the difference between what just a simple substitution of technology is versus really redefining our learning and our teaching when we're using technology. And so in each of these instances that I'll be sharing tonight, I want you to think about, is it a substitution level augmentation? Is it a modification? Is there some significant redesign of the task or transformation of how learning is taking place and teaching is taking place? Or is there at such a level that there's redefinition of how math is learned? And so I just really want you to think about that as we go through each of the tools that I'll be teaching today or sharing about. So really, when we're looking at all of the technology, I'm looking at various tools that come into play, such as the hardware, of tablets, students bringing in their own devices, computers, and web tools. And so today, we're going to be looking at the various tools, and as a teacher, being able to use these tools effectively at the right time is really important. How you're using it in the planning phase, how you're going to allow teach your students how to use it when they're doing their math can really tweak and change whether you're using it just for substitution or redefining what math looks like in your classroom. And that's really what we're looking at today. So again, we're going to revisit the 3-part math lesson, and I'm not going to go into debate about whether or not this is the right format. I know that there's some others there sharing about, for example, Kyle Pierce talking about the 4-part math lesson. I'm not going to really go deeply into that aspect of math today, but more just giving you ideas of how you can use various technology tools at these various levels. And again, in terms of the consolidation, I'm focusing more on the assessment part. So to begin with, when we're looking at minds-on, what are some of the ways that we can use technology? Now, in my part 1 session, I shared about different ways that I used it, and I focused a lot on Google Slides presentation. But I'm going to be looking at many different tools today, and some of it might overlap with what I may have shared in part 1, but I'm going to dive deeper into some of the tools that we're sharing. So when we're looking at minds-on, we're looking at how we're going to help students activate their thinking and mentally prepare them for the task or the math that they will be engaging in. So one way that we can engage students is with videos. How many of you use videos in your classroom? Oh, again, check mark if you use videos in your classroom. Great. So you can see that many of us are already used to using videos in our classroom, and perhaps some of you have a flipped model in your of teaching in your classroom where you give the videos the night before, where students' homework becomes the learning of the content, so that you have more time during the class to be able to focus on the investigation and helping and supporting students through that. I wanted to show you that there's actually tons of video websites that you can go to, and a lot of them are really rich. I mean, for me, most of the time I go to YouTube, but beyond YouTube, there's a lot of really, really great resources, and a lot of them are free. So BrainPop is an amazing, phenomenal resource, especially if you're in primary, junior, but also in the intermediate grades. Their videos are very clear. It comes with closed captioning. Not all of them are free. Some of them are. But if you have an opportunity to invest as a school in BrainPop, they have a lot of really great videos that become great content teaching tools. Learn 360 is through OSAPAC, and that's free for all Ontario educators. And then being able to access Learn Alberta videos are also really, really great. And I've included the links there so that you can see just some of the videos. The ones in Learn Alberta I like because they often show real life examples of how math is incorporated and how math is part of our everyday life. A new one that I've kind of looked into is Guru, and they touch upon all different topics, and you can search by curricular areas, by grade, and again by topics once you're in the math section. And again, there's also Khan Academy, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Now, I'm going to have you look at a video right now, and while we're watching this video, and the topic we're going to be looking at is mean, median, and mode, I just want you to think about how this video can be used in a math classroom, and especially when you think about before you started your class. So I'm just going to grab that video really quickly, and
I've got it there, Sandra. So
okay.
You can either click on the link, or you can watch it in the web tour. And when you're finished, if you could just put a check mark and let us know that you're finished watching.
Please feel free to share your thoughts even throughout the video. Okay. Okay, so just if you can share some of your ideas, how could this video be used as a minds-on, or even during or after, during the investigation, or as a consolidation piece in a math class, and specifically more in data management. And RG shared. Mr. RG shared a little bit, but if others could put their ideas also in the chat box, that would be great. Or if you want to use your microphone and share, that would be also fine. So one example we talked, Mr. RG talked about was putting in as a poll. Yes, they could write their own songs. Great, yes. I find using videos as a review of certain concepts is also very, very helpful. And definitely a video as in Google Classroom or Edmodo. I love how you included some of the technology tools that you can use, and have students kind of mull upon it and even discuss about the various mean, median, and mode concepts is a great tool. And activating prior knowledge, definitely. So I want you to think deeper about when you're posting questions for students. Think about kind of questions that can really activate thinking. So when you're putting in the video, especially in flipped learning, talk about when might we use the various averages, mean, median, mode, in everyday life? Why are there different forms of averages? And maybe have students think about, oh, why is it that we have a mean, a median, and a mode? Why would we have these different types of averages? So thinking about good questions to ask is really important. And having students discuss it before they even come to the classroom really, really makes your time in the classroom more rich, where you can really investigate. So once we've done that before class has even started, where students have kind of mulled over, okay, why might we have these different averages? Then the investigation part would be actually giving them data, looking at data where they're trying the different medians, the mean, calculating the median, the mean, and the mode, and then thinking about, well, which of these averages are the most appropriate for interpreting the data and most helpful. And giving them real-life data for that can be really, really rich learning. And before having technology, before being able to send the technology home, you cannot send a VHS tape home with students to every single student and copy and paste it and have any video at your fingertips to do that with. But now with technology we can, and it really has redefined how students can learn, and the tools that you're sending off to students and the information that you're giving to students. And even thinking about during the investigation step, if the student's calculating the mean and the median and the mode, rather than having to ask you again how to calculate it, it's at their fingertips. They already can rewatch the video. And it's true, Mr. RG, that some of the students don't have it, but I find that there are more students that have it than I sometimes realize. I'm in a lower income area in my school, and actually when I did a poll of my students and how many students actually had internet, whether it be through data plans on their phone or Wi-Fi or going to the library, I actually had 95% of my students had access to internet at home. And so that was actually surprising to me. And then at the end, having the video shown and having students think about which form of average do you think is most appropriate for the question that we asked, and revisiting it can be a very rich tool. So that was just videos, and now you have a couple more websites and resources that you can go to for videos. But another effective way to get students thinking about the content ahead of time, I find, is also games. And I've included a couple of just games that I find really, resources and links that I found really great. Why I like these specific ones is because when you go to these websites, it's not usually just one strand. It actually covers many strands. And so if I want to activate students' prior knowledge and see how much they know and evaluate it, I can go to these websites and activate a number of different games and variety of games. And it becomes a really great tool for me. And usually when I'm looking for a game, honestly, I don't go directly to these websites sometimes. I often start with a Google search. And the terms I often use is math topic, interactive, or game. So I would put any of these combination of words into the chat, into the search. So I've just included them in the chat. Any of these words into the search term, and then that would help me to find a lot of these websites. And I find a lot of these websites always keep popping up. And so I'd be like, oh, I like the Soft Schools website, and I'd go straight to that one first because I'd say I know these websites really well. And if there's one for Manga High, I definitely go to that one as well because they have very great math games. So I'm just going to play a math game with you right now. And it's actually a very simple one, and it's related to, so I've put the link there. And so I'm going to actually share my screen right now and play the game. And as you're playing, I just want you to think about, compared to how you normally would have played or done multiplication in the past, how might this be more exciting and fun and engaging for students in comparison? So this is my screen, but please go ahead and play on your own as well. Basically, when you go in, you just need to write your name, and you can make up your name. I can just put teacher 888. And you'll notice that there's various games that you can join. And you'll be competing with other people when you play. And it becomes a race. So I'm just going to start a game, and you'll be competing with different people. So I'm just going to play. So I'm not sure if all of you guys are playing as well. Some of you might be playing with me. Okay, and so then you finish the game. So you can see the game is really fast, but I went through 34 questions within that 1 minute. And it gives you an accuracy as well as a rate per minute. So I'm just going to come back to our session. Sure. Were people able to play the game? Maybe thumbs up if you were able to play the game. Yeah. Okay, yeah, some people just watched. No problem. But you can see in the span of 1 minute, I was able to do 36 multiplication questions. And sometimes I have students pair up and do the game together. But when I grew up and I had to do, yeah, it was just on a website. So it should be available on mobile devices. But when I grew up, I did a lot of Mad Minutes. How many of you guys did Mad Minutes? Right? And I actually kind of enjoyed Mad Minutes, but in comparison to Mad Minutes, so a Mad Minute would be you get 1 page of questions, and in 1 minute, it's how many questions you would do. But in comparison to the game I just played, students become much more engaged. And the great thing is it calculates for you immediately. So a student can play this game and the data is all there. You know their accuracy. You know how many questions they've done per minute. And it took 1 minute for them to do. I didn't have to go through all the answers with the students. When I did a Mad Minute, it didn't literally take a minute. It actually took 10 minutes because you pass out the paper, and then you take it up with the class. And this is so much more engaging and fun for students, and they compete because they're actually competing with other students on that screen. They can say, oh, I came in first, or I came in second. And so it's a much more engaging way to have a minds-on, to activate their learning, to see where they're at. Sometimes it's just a diagnostic for students, but it's quick. And they can be anonymous. The students didn't have to put their own name, but they could track their own learning, and they can continue to do this. And I saw some people say they can do this at home again once they've done that. And it's not just related to multiplication. Like, of course, that was a little bit of a drill and kill, but some of these games are really, really great. So, for example, in this corner over here where it says Manga High, some of them relate to calculating circumferences or the perimeter or area. So one question might ask for the perimeter, the other question will ask for the area, and the kids really have to discern and think about the difference between a perimeter and an area. And so they're really fun and engaging ways to have the students learn versus what was available before technology was there. And just other ways that you can actually assess students as well in terms of a diagnostic. There's a lot of really great tools now, such as Kahoot, Socrative, quizzes, and then clickers. All of these are really, really great tools that you can use as a diagnostic assessment. So say you taught something the day before and you want to see where students are at and whether or not you need to revisit some of the concepts that you taught from the day before. These are just some really fun and engaging ways that you can have students learn. So last time I shared about quizzes, and if you click on the resources, Molly, if you don't mind putting in some of the resources, there are just all of these are free. So clickers, Socrative, quizzes, and Kahoot, they're all free. You can sign in as a teacher. It has all the diagnostics, so if you put it up there, all the reports are there and you can look at them. And then there's also a link in terms of what the differences are between the three up here. Clickers is a little bit different. Now, it works similarly. How many of you have used any of these at all? Again, check mark if you have used any of these. And please share in the chat your experiences with any of them if you have tried them. Quizzes is, so Kahoot and Socrative, you actually have to log in to be able to explore and see all of the quizzes that people have put in. But they're really, really engaging and fun. And so Socrative is neat because there's, you can have diagnostics, you can have team games, you can also have an exit card. Kahoot is also really neat because there's an option for ghost mode. And so what ghost mode is once you've played a game, you can actually replay a game, and students can replay the game and compete against themselves. So actually, let's go into a quizzes game. I'm not sure.
I put it in, Sandra.
Oh, did you put him in? Oh, yeah, you did. Okay, I just didn't scroll down. Great. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just not. Okay, so I'm going to actually activate, I'm going to show you how quizzes works. So I'm going to come out right now and show you one of the games. And the reason why I'm doing quizzes is because you don't actually have to log in to play the game. You can actually just play without logging in, which is great, especially for our purposes. But Socrative and Kahoot were very much the same. I'm going to put in coordinate. So we're going to do some coordinate geometry here. And we're just going to do a simple, easy coordinate grid and play live. So see how it says skip, reports won't be saved? This allows you to play an activity without having to actually log in. But then whatever when people are playing the game, the reports won't be saved for you. So when you're actually playing with students, it's helpful to actually have a class set up. But for our purposes, I just wanted to show you what a game like this might look like. So if you can, on your screen, go to join.quizzes.com and then enter this code, 801373. So just go to joinquizzes.com and I'll just show you what it looks like, joinquizzes.com. And it'll look like this, and you have to enter a 6-digit code, so just enter 801373. And then just press proceed. It'll ask for your name, and then you can just join the game. So if you've joined the game, so I've got 2 people joining the game so far. And again, you can do this from your device. It doesn't have to be your computer. You can do it from any device, a tablet, a phone, which makes it really handy for students. iPods. Okay, and keep joining. I'm going to start the game now. And basically, you will be able to just go ahead and go at your own pace. And as a teacher, so those who are on my screen, you can see kind of the view that a teacher sees. And you can see that Julie's doing really well. Oh, M's catching up. So is Jay. And if I scroll down, I can actually see the questions as well. And the fun thing about quizzes is it gives these different memes. And memes are basically like pop culture pictures, and then they'll say, you got it, or something. And so the kids like that. It's kind of fun and funny. And it also tracks the error. So you can see the green is the correct and red is the incorrect. And then when it's done, as a teacher, you've got all this data, and it's kind of fun. I'm just going to end the game there. And this is what the report would look like. So this is the score. In this case, M1. Congratulations. And you can see which questions seem to be a little bit more challenging for the students. So you don't necessarily have to have the students log in with their name to be able to understand, okay, I might need to review this type of a question with the student. And that becomes a very valuable tool for a teacher. So I'm just going to go back to any questions about that? Oh yeah, I love the idea of having it as a center. Especially in the primary grades, you can actually have students rotate through it, and that would definitely be really fun for students. So Kahoots work very similarly as with Socrative. What is different out of all the ones that I gave Yeah, it is very similar to Kahoot. The reason why I chose quizzes is you don't have to log in. Clickers is completely different though. So what happens is you print, and I've put in a video, a link for you. You print out a whole bunch of cards, and once you have the cards, each student gets a card, and depending on the orientation of the card, that will tell you what answer they've chosen. So it's kind of a good low-tech tool. If you don't have, if every student doesn't have devices, you can print out these clicker cards and ask the same questions and using your device. So if you have an iPad or if you have a phone, you can actually just scan the audience and it will tell you their answer. But again, it's anonymous. So every student has one of these clicker cards, and they can scan. You can scan the audience to see what their answers are. So it's, again, a really, really great, fun, energizing tool for students to use, and it gives you an idea of where they're at. And then just kind of the last tool that I often use in terms of Minds On is ways that we can access authentic data and learning. I always want to put math in the context of real life and let students see that math is actually everywhere and it's relevant in their lives. And so I put in a couple of these tools. Thanks, Molly, for just putting them in. And, you know, whether it be from reading a newspaper article, through Teaching Kids News or Google News, going to Statistics Canada and getting some real data, or if you're doing weather patterns, you might as well go straight to Old Farmer's Almanac for kids. They have that all online now, and getting the real temperature for that month. But what I'm going to actually share with you today is Google Trends. Again, check mark if you've ever heard of Google Trends or used Google Trends in your classroom. Okay, so not many people have used it, so that's great. I'm going to just show you an example of how you can use Google Trends in your classroom. So again, I'm just going to come out, and I wanted to show you. So something that's been in the news a lot, and I like this because you can bring in the social studies piece into mathematics. So if you're doing grade 5 and you're doing government, you can all of a sudden talk about data management along with something that's really relevant. So I'm going to put in Rob Ford. So what Google Trends does is it tabulates all of the search trends that's gone through Google. And I mean, Google has tons of data. But basically, if you look at this graph, it tells you the interest over time of people around the world related to Rob Ford. So you can see here 2005 all the way up to 2016, and it peaked here in November 2013. And it's not 100 searches. It's kind of all relative. If you look at the question mark, says numbers represent search interest relative to the highest point on the chart. So it's all relative to the 100% mark. It's not that there were only 100 searches, but you can see he peaked at 100. Now, that's really interesting in itself, and then if you scroll down, you can see the regional interest. So Canada had the most search volume, but there were some in the United States, Ireland, UK, and Netherlands. So it has some really interesting data, and if you scroll down where that data comes from. Related searches, so crack cocaine, Toronto mayoral election, Rob Ford and Kimmel. So just kind of very interesting data. But I'm going to add a search term and add in Justin Trudeau. So in junior grades especially, oftentimes you have to talk about analyzing statistical data. And so you can see Rob Ford totally outperformed Justin Trudeau in terms of search terms and how many people were interested. And so I found that very interesting. And then you can have a discussion with students about, well, why is that so? Why would Rob Ford be more interested? Is negative news more interesting than positive news? And then let's add in Donald, let's add in Donald Trump. And let's see how that compares to Rob Ford. And you can see, wow, okay, Rob Ford looked like he had a lot, but now compared to Donald Trump, he's pretty small potatoes. And then let's look at Obama, Barack Obama, and let's see how that compares as well. And you can see that although Barack Obama did really well in 2008 and 2009, November 2008, he still did not outperform Donald Trump. So this is just some really, really interesting data that you can investigate with students. And it's real life, and it's interesting. You can tie it into social studies. And when you look at this kind of data versus something that's in a textbook, it becomes really interesting. So that was just some of the information. Google Public Data Explorer, I like how actually you guys already talked about Donald Trump. When you look at Google Public Data Explorer, you're looking at more census data. So you might look at poverty, population, environment, and all of that kind of data. And so, again, that becomes really, really rich for students. So those are just some of the tools that I tend to use as minds-on. And that launches really well into where the students start to investigate. And the tools that we use to help students investigate their math and their problem solving. So, you know, after we have the game or the assessment and you know where the students are at, I've set up the problem using authentic information and authentic data. That's when we move into the investigation. And so here I have an example of Google Slides that I use. And in part one of my workshop, I did a simulation of how my colleagues and I use Google Slides extensively. And I'm not going to dive in as much today of how we use it and the benefits, but I'm going to share a little bit for the benefit of those who were not part of part one. And also just give you another example of how Google Slides is such an effective tool for math investigation. And the reason why I use Google Slides. So again, I'm just going to log in to my screen so that I can share with you just how we use this. So you have access to this, and you can come back to this anytime you want. Just double check everybody can see my screen. Okay. So this example, I'm not going to go into the video, but you can see that in Google Slides, this is pretty much my whole lesson for that day. We would start off with a minds-on, a video of some sort, and where we're introducing the students to what's happening in the world and how children are actually not, how so many students are faced with hunger. And then show them this another video of how buying a goat can really influence and impact the lives of a family. And we use this for problem-solving strategies, and it's kind of around a time where we did something called shoeboxes, and the students were kind of sharing about how they might prepare for even giving something away to a charity of some sort. And so the learning goal here, and you can see we usually put our learning goals in our success criteria one after another here. Use problem-solving strategies to understand how one goat can impact the food supply of a family in Uganda. And these are some success criteria that we started straight from in September. We use an acronym called ICES, so illustration, calculation, explain, so the communication aspect, and then solution, because oftentimes the students forget to put in the final solution that they actually have. So we came up with this acronym ICES, the question, and break. So these are some things that we've been kind of going through since September. How to break down the problem by highlighting the question and the characters and the action. So I'm just going to go through, and you can see that the students are working in groups in this case. So they were in groups of 3, and each group had one computer. So there would be one student operating the computer, and then they would alternate between that. But you can see that we start off where everybody kind of gets a blank question. So they just got this one question: one goat is able to assist a hungry family. And so they were just given the question. But because they're in Google Slides, they have access to all of these amazing tools, including the shapes, the lines, tables, being able to insert tables, and the text tool. And then along with that, when you type in text, you can also change the text color and put in highlight colors. So in this case, my students use the highlight feature to highlight and break down the problem. And that is one thing that we iterate with the students over and over again, being able to break down the problem so they understand what they're doing. So you can see how pink is their question. They're trying to figure out how many people would that help. That was their question. And if you kind of go down, you can see there's the question. The students broke down, they created a text box, broke down the question, and they broke down what do they know. And just to see the different ways that the students have illustrated it, this group got as far as just illustrating. They didn't get to calculating or explaining. But you can see that they started with, 6. They know that there's something about 6. So one goat fed 6. They got that far. Next, you have another group where they're using a number line. And somehow they decided, they're going to go up by 40, and then there were 6. So it was kind of interesting. I added here as a question, explain why you added 40 6 times on your number line. And we discussed this as a class during the consolidation stage. But you can see that the tools that they use the line, the text boxes to break down their thinking. There's the calculation, and it's all there. And then another group here, they decided to use the graphing tool, and each of these things, so here it's actually pink represents 10 goats, red represents 20 goats, and there, you can see there is some kind of a calculation error here. But you can see that just the different ways the students are using the tools in Google Slides to be able to calculate. Here there's using a table. There's 1 times 6, 2 times 6, 3 times 6, all the way up to 40 times 6. And they're explaining their thinking. And then this was the most interesting one, where they decided to bring in, so because you can insert images, they inserted a hundreds chart. And they're using the hundreds chart to help them with their thinking. So 1 goat helps 6, 2 goats helps 12, 3 goats helps 18. So you can see how they're using this tool to demonstrate their thinking. And as you go forth, you can see that there's kind of different students going through different types of thinking. And then at the very end, kind of do a consolidation video of just how buying 40 goats, what that impact has. So this is just an example of how we use Google Slides in our class. And I wanted to share with you just another example as well. If you go here, oops, I forgot to include that link. So I'm just going to include that right now for all of you in the chat box. So this is, again, a different example. And in here, this is a Google Slide, but related to geometry. And here, the students were doing transformations. So you can see that they started with 1, and sorry, just kind of thinking. And here's the task that I wrote at the bottom. You look at the bottom. So task is to rotate the triangle 90 degrees clockwise about vertex C, and then label the vertices coordinates of your image. Label the Cartesian plane and use scale of 2. So the background, you can actually change the background of Google Slides. And so by putting the background there, students are able to do so many different things and demonstrate their thinking. And I don't know about you, but in the past, a lot of my students had drawing as a barrier. Just drawing their Cartesian plane took so long that they weren't able to focus on the actual task because they were focused on just drawing their Cartesian plane. But if you have a Cartesian plane already there for them, then they're beginning to focus on the task. And so technology takes away some of that drawing barrier or neatness barrier that some of my students have, especially my IEP students, because
yeah, this might be the lag that we were describing, because I can see that Sandra's internet is lagging. Sandra, did we lose you? Oh. I think Sandra just got kicked out of the room, which happens sometimes when you're sharing a screen. So where do you go to learn all about Google Classroom? I'll find the link, but I'll just go and get the link, and hopefully Sandra will realize that her presentation has. Oh, there she is. She's coming in. She's also logged in on her iPad. So I'll just go get the information about Google Classroom. Okay, Sandra, you're moderator again. I just see that you're just on your iPad, so hopefully that's going to work. Oh, there you are. I see you there as well.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. So I'm just going to get myself set up again. So after Google Slides, besides Google Slides, sometimes you can also use other Web 2.0 tools to brainstorm and get students sharing their investigations. And two really popular ones, Padlet is one that's really popular. And the great thing about Padlet is it's easy to use with things like iPads, where you want students to capture their pictures, whereas Google Slides is really much more useful when you have a computer, because a lot of the tools are more rich when you're using the computer. So if you're not in a one-to-one computer classroom, but you have access to iPads, having something like using something like a Padlet is really great, because students can actually take pictures really easily, share using manipulatives, and share their thinking. And it's kind of like a brainstorming tool. So you can see in this example, students were just going to the web and finding pictures of something that looks various 3D images that they can see. Or in Linuit, you can draw some pictures and then post the picture into a kind of brainstorming wall and put it in. And there's another link from my friend Mira Campbell, and the link is bit.ly visible map making, and she kind of shares just how she was using Padlet as a tool with her students in all various grades for primary, and how they were able to just make their thinking visible. So not only do they have the visual pictures that they capture from their iPads, but then they're able to share and talk about it and communicate their thinking by using the text tool in Padlet. Do you have that link, Molly?
I'll look for it.
Oh, here, I'll just stick that in. It's right there. So that just gives you some ideas of how you can use a Padlet as a tool. And Padlet, you don't need a login for students, but as a teacher, if you log in, you get to keep all of the brainstorms and the information there. But if you use Linoit, you actually do have to log in, and students have to log in. So if that becomes a barrier, I would use Padlet. And then at the investigation phase, being able to use manipulatives are also very, very helpful. So these are just a few of the manipulatives that you can access that are available. National Library of Virtual Manipulatives is probably one that's been around the longest, and has a lot of rich uses from primary as well as all the way up to intermediate. Matthews is actually put out through the Ontario Ministry of Ontario and has a lot of great manipulatives. And this Symbaloo is just one that a teacher compiled of all these various manipulatives that she found online, and she just put it all in this one very visual website that you can access, and from there you can use this with your students. But I'm going to give you an example of how you can use manipulatives, online virtual manipulatives in your classroom. And this is a lesson that I did with my students, and we're doing fractions and looking at equivalent fractions. And it's kind of a reversal of how I use technology. Usually the technology, so like in Google Slides, is where I record the students' thinking, and the interaction happens all on the technology side there. But in this case, it was a puzzle. So this was the whole investigation piece, was the puzzle. And I got this actually on a website, and after the students, so I just cut up the squares. So what the kids got were these very squares, and they had to put it together into this one larger square to complete the puzzle. But along the way, they're learning about equivalent fractions. So they're trying to figure out, okay, well, what are some of the nuances to make so that I know that fractions are equivalent? And this is where bringing in a tool like the eliminations equivalent fractions. I'm just going to show you the link. Is really helpful. So I've just put in the link right there. If you go into it, you can see that you can change the different types of the hole. So it can be a square or a circle hole. You can change the number of the pieces in your hole. And then there's two squares. So maybe I'll just go into it right now and just show you. Hopefully I don't get knocked out. So this is basically how it works, and then you choose a square or circle. So if, in this case, I'm looking at 4/30, you can have students create their pieces. So there's 8, and so they even have to figure out how they're going to get 30. If you want, that's at 40. So see how the blue changes? That's too much. So I'm going to change it to 6, and there's my 30th. How do I get 4? You just kind of fill it in. So there's my 4. So now the trick is to find something that is equivalent so that you can get the green at the same. And so you can try different things. You can fill it in. Oh, that's too much, so I make it smaller. That doesn't look right. And so you kind of kind of just play around until you get the equivalent fraction. And it becomes quite an investigation for students. And hopefully, your goal is if they do enough of these equivalent fractions and find matches, they find patterns in how they're able to find equivalent fractions, and then they share that thinking, and that's in the consolidation piece afterwards, where students would talk about, oh, when I did this, I realized if I had the same, if I multiplied the numerator and the denominator by the same amount, it gives me an equivalent fraction. And hopefully they come to that on their own using a tool like that, but they get so much practice through using a puzzle like this. So this is like, I find sometimes when they're using manipulatives that are not digital, they're playing with it and they don't really know how to figure it out. But this manipulative is so fabulous that the kids can really focus on the patterns that they see. And so that's just a different way that you can use a digital online manipulative during the investigation phase. And then kind of the last two tools I wanted to look at in terms of investigation is the Chrome extensions and applications. Again, check mark if any of you guys have used Chrome extensions or applications, whether it be in math or in other areas. So as you go ahead and click, I'm just kind of want to see how many people use them. Basically, to access all of these, you go to the Chrome Web Store. And when you go to the Chrome Web Store, you have access to either applications, extensions, or add-ons. And so the difference between an application and an extension is quite simple. An extension is a little comes on as a little addition to your Chrome browser, and it resides like a tiny icon on the top right corner, and you don't need to launch into another program to use it because you can use it in conjunction with something you're already doing in the browser. Whereas an application, where these are the applications, are something that it's almost like a website, and it's a bookmark to a website. So you actually have to launch into something else to be able to use it. So I'm just going to, again, share my screen and show you the differences between the extension and the application. So you go to the Chrome Web Store. So here's the Web Store. You can see it says apps, games, extensions, and themes. We're going to focus on either the apps or the extensions. And very simply, one of the extensions that I always tell my students to have is a calculator, which is great. You don't have to go and purchase calculators if you already have devices. There's no need to go ahead and purchase another app store. And you can see that there's apps and then there's extensions. So I tend to have my calculator as an extension, and what that does is, you see these little tiny icons? If I ever need a calculator, all I need to do is click on it, and there it is. It has all of my cosine, sines, my regular calculator, and if you really want to go fancy and look for graphing calculators, there are some extensions that allows you to have graphing calculators as well. So these are just kind of small extensions on the side. Now I'm going to show you some of my favorites. There's a calculator that I always have my students have on the side. But this one's another great one called Tab Resize. So what it does is it allows you to resize all of your tabs. And so you can see I have many tabs open. And sometimes, especially when you're using manipulatives, like we did, like I showed you with the equivalent fractions, you might want to have your equivalent fractions on one side, your manipulative on one side, and then your Google slide deck on the other side. So having something like 2 tabs side by side is really, really helpful. And it resizes your tabs so that you can see one screen and then the other screen. Or if you really need to, you can even have 4 screens at once, and then allows you to see all your different tabs that are open, but all in one screen. And then if you need to go back to the single, then you can just go back to the single, and then there you are. So that's tab resize. Let me just, sorry, go back to one. Next, there is Screencastify. So why I like Screencastify is because it allows me to cast my screen. So let's say a student is doing something and they want to share with the teacher their thinking, but they don't want to have to type it up. So using something like Screencastify allows you to actually record your screen. So when you click on it, it allows you to actually record your screen and the audio that comes along with it. So a student can explain their thinking while pointing to the screen, and it comes into a video, and then they can upload the video into Google Drive. Or alternatively, if a student just wants, especially some of the IEP students, want to share their thinking, but they're not really good in language, language does not become a barrier when you use something like voice note. And so what voice note does is it opens just another tab, and here's the tab, and if I click on the world and choose English, I can just click on the microphone and type and it'll type anything I say. So, oh, there it is. So you can say and type it, it'll type anything I say. Please disregard all of my other words, or I wanted to share my thinking when I was doing the problem. So you can see it types everything that I say. So these are just some of the extensions that I use with my students, and that I find really, really, really helpful. An application, so I'm just going to get my screen back in order. Applications are like websites. So how I see it, and you notice I put the bookmark symbol, I see it as a bookmark to a website that's really, really useful. So for example, Webcam Toy allows you to turn your computer into a camera, and students can actually take pictures of whatever they're doing. Let's say they're using hands-on manipulatives, they can take pictures of that, or if they prefer to draw it out, they can use the Webcam Toy to draw out the picture and then take a picture using Webcam Toy and post it onto the Google Slides. GMath isn't, actually before I go to that, Desmos is a graphing calculator website. It does tons actually, and how many? I think there were 5 of you who were intermediate. I'm not sure if more came on, but how many of you guys have used Desmos, especially in the intermediate grades? Okay, so I find Desmos. Okay, so Webcam Toy basically, I'll show you really quickly. So I'm just going to come out and I'll show you what Webcam Toy is. So Webcam Toy is basically a camera tool. It allows you to. Where's my? I lost all of mine after tab resize. Sorry about that. Okay, so it allows you to use the camera on your computer. So the student does something that is not on the computer screen, and they do something that's visual. You can actually use the Webcam Toy tool to take pictures. So oftentimes I actually have them turn their computer around because especially if they don't have a tablet allows you to take pictures, but sorry, that's a picture of me. But you can have the students take a picture of whatever's on their table. And so if they're doing manipulatives or whatnot, they can take a picture, or if they did a drawing, they can take a picture, and it allows them to then show that and post that onto the Google slide to show their thinking, and then use the other tools to explain the way that they solve the math problem. But if I were to do Desmos, this is a different website. This is very much a graphing calculator tool. So again, graphing calculators can range from $85 to $100. They're really, really expensive. But Desmos is a free website that allows you to do many things that a graphing calculator can do, but even more. So for example, here I'm going to type in x. Can you all see my screen? So x plus 1 equals, sorry, x plus y. Let's do x plus y equals 2. So you can see how it graphs it right away. If I take the graph away, it's gone. But I can put in another one. So I'm going to put in y equals x squared plus 2. So now I've got two graphs. And again, if I just want to take one or the other. And with students, this becomes a great investigation tool. So what happens if I turn this to 3? I'm going to turn the blue one off. Turn it to 3. What happens to my graph? What about if I turn it to 4, 5? How does changing the answer here change my graph? And then you can have investigations with students about that. If you take this one off and you move into any questions that have y equals in that format, you can actually look at the table as well. So again, you can not only see how the graph changes, but you can see how the table changes. So x squared plus 3, look how my table changes. And have students look at that and then investigate and talk about how that affects their graph, how changing the variables affects their graph. What if I put in a 2? How does that affect my table? How does that affect my graph? And so rather than having to draw out on paper 5 different graphs, this can do it instantly, and they don't have to pay for a graphing calculator. It's actually a free website that they can access. GeoGebra is actually very similar to Desmos. They both do very similar things. Yeah, it saves so much time and money, and you can really focus on the concepts of the math as opposed to on the drawing of the math. I mean, if you're thinking about the students in their future, how many of them are actually going to have to draw their graphs? But maybe understanding the equations becomes really important. Yeah, Desmos is more user-friendly than GeoGebra, but GeoGebra has some other features as well. And I'm putting the link there, and you can explore them. They're both free, and I'm not going to move into it right now. But they're both definitely tools you can look at. Now, GMath, as I talked about, is an add-on. And what add-ons are, why add-ons are different is that you actually have to move into a Google Docs to be able to access it. And once you're in the Google Docs, what GMath does, it allows you to draw graphs or input equations into your Google Docs very, very simply. And I'm, again, not going to demo it, but if you go to YouTube, you can actually find tons of videos on how you can use GMath as a tool in Google Docs. It doesn't work in slides, unfortunately, yet, but it does work in Google Docs, and it works in Google Forms. And GMath is, again, a great tool for especially algebra, for graphing, for data management, for geometry. They're very useful. To get GMath, you just have to open Google Docs and go to add-ons, and then from there you get to the Chrome Web Store, and then you can add the GMath add-on. But again, if you go to YouTube and just look up GMath, there's tons of videos on how you can add that as an add-on into your Google Docs. Okay, so these are just all tools that I find very, very helpful during the investigation stage, where students are exploring problems, and you want them to focus on the problem and having the technology as a help in terms of helping them to solve the problem. So now we're going to move into kind of the assessment piece of things, and how using technology can really help you with your assessments. And I wanted to look at assessments in very different ways. One of the ways that I find really effective in understanding where students are at in their thinking, in their understanding of what we've talked about in mathematics, is using discussion forums. Now, this is an example of our Toronto District School Board discussion forum. It's called Academic Workspace. But the concept can be translated into Google Classroom, into Edmodo, D2L if you use D2L, or other kind of discussion forum websites. But you can see here, I was talking with our students, we were talking with our students about the metric system. And the question that we posed that evening was, did they think metric system was better or the imperial system? And students moved into dialogues and they shared their thinking. But the great thing is, not only are they posting their ideas or writing it down in their own journal, but they're posting it in a forum where their peers are able to see their thinking as well. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the quality of writing that comes out from students, and even what they say, because when they're or how they read each other's work and how they grow from each of that. So when students post their thinking, they're really trying to polish their writing before they press that post button. And once they post it, they know that other students are going to be looking at their thinking. And then they can build on each other's thinking from there. So you can see this example, number 22 was posted. So number 4 posted their answer. And number 22 posted their answer, and it says, yes, I agreed with what most people have voted for, that the metric system would be easier to measure because you can multiply or divide of tens. By using this, you could convert. So you can kind of see where students are thinking and what they understand about the metric system versus the imperial system. And I often come in and respond and talk about their thinking as well, and say, well, okay, this is a really good idea, example of thinking, and their arguments are presented really well, and they even gave an example. So that helps students to see, oh, this is an example of a good communication of thinking when it comes to math. And that is very powerful, because not only are students able to communicate their thinking, but they're able to see what good communication would look like. And so the next time they post, they're going to model that kind of communication. It won't be the same answer, but we found that as we continued using the discussion forums, the quality of communication improved drastically with our students. The students care about what they post because they have an audience, and that's powerful.
Okay, Sandra, I just need to sort of pop in here for a second, just to be cognizant of time. It's almost 9 o'clock, and I noticed a couple people have had to pop out already. So,
right.
And I know you still have quite a bit more to do.
Okay, so I'll just rush through really. Sorry, I lost track of time. Another example I'll kind of go through really quickly is using math journals, and again, being digital allows you, and I've included a Google site of Delia Capitale-Tavares and how she uses it with her students. But using digital math journals really allows students, again, to put in their thinking, but it allows a teacher to be able to look at it very quickly and in a timely manner. So just various tools for feedback. Google Classroom we kind of talked about, and you can use the discussion forum aspect of it there. But also, if students hand in their assignments, Google Classroom allows you to track and give feedback to students really quickly. Kaizena is another really great tool because it gives you verbal feedback. So students can put in their thoughts or comments verbally, and the teacher can also give back their feedback through verbal comments. So that's another great tool. And I heard that Apple's launching their Apple Classroom, which allows them to integrate iPads through one device. So the teacher will have access to all of the iPads through one device. And so again, you can see that the feedback can be very timely. Doing how-to videos is also really great. I talked about Screencastify, but Educreations, Explain Everything, and Jing are other tools that you can use. Educreations and Explain Everything are more app-related, so they are great for iPads or tablets, whereas Screencastify and Jing would be really great for computers, where students can share their learning and their understanding through how-to videos and videos with students. I've included some other assessment websites that students can use for practice. A lot of these relate to adaptive learning. So once students put in their do the activity, the program oftentimes learns and understands how much students know, and then adapt to the learning and give different questions based on what the students have responded with. So these are all just some really great websites. Some of them free. Prodigy is free, but some of them are paid. SumDog is also free, I believe. And just a few more. Google Forms is another great way for assessment, and it's pretty timely. You can use conditional formatting, and I shared that in part 1. So I'm not going to go into detail about that, but you can use conditional formatting to grade your Google Forms, as well as using add-ons. So you can see the add-on tool over here, using Flubaroo, which will also grade Google Forms for you really, really quickly. Sesame is a tool that you can use as a teacher to kind of build up a portfolio of student learning. So you can see here, you've got a student, you can put in, take pictures of what the students have done or include videos and artifacts and put it all into one portfolio so that come report card time, all these artifacts can be shared with the parents or with other teachers all through digitally. So if you've seen something that a student has done, take a picture of that or take a screenshot of what they've done, put it in this portfolio, and it allows you as a teacher to have access to all of this information digitally. So you can scroll through students, scroll through years, scroll through subject areas, and go through that way. And then finally, Crowdmark is a moderated marking tool, which allows you to upload paper tests onto the web, and then as teachers, you can moderate the marking. So you can see here on the right, I could be as a teacher mark all the question 1s. My colleague can mark all the question 2s, and if you have a question about one of the tests or assessments, you can flag it, and as a group, you can look at it together and say, oh yeah, I would give that level 4 or level 3, and it really moderates the marking, especially if you all have the same assessment. So that's Crowdmark. And if you go there, the founder, James Colliander, said if you sign up for Crowdmark and there's a trial, he would really like to connect with you as well to see what you think, because it is still in the infancy the program. So just to leave you off with some final thoughts, I gave you tons of resources and technology tools, but just to remember that technology can be a really powerful vehicle that advances your teaching and student learning forward. But if we teach in cruise control and lose sight of our destination and focus just on the trendiness of the technology as opposed to how we're using the technology, we can easily lose our way and get lost in that highway of technology without using it effectively and redefining how we're actually teaching and students are learning the math. So that kind of is a rush through all of the tools that I use in math, and I hope that it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, I'll still be behind at the end, and feel free to tweet me or email me if you have any questions, and I'll still be around if any of you want to hang on. Sorry, I went over by about 4 minutes, but I'm here.
Thanks, Sandra. That was like phenomenal. Just so many tools that people can actually take back to their classroom and use them tomorrow. Even if they use one of them, it'll change something for their students, and I think it's just great. So just a couple of things to wrap up before we do answer some questions. So if as a participant, if you could complete the feedback survey, it has sort of a 3-part need to it, that it will provide feedback to OTF Connects for about the session, and to Sandra about her amazing session, and also give some information to the Ministry of Education. So there are 3 ways that you can get it. First of all will be when you actually log out of this session, it will take you directly to the feedback link, the survey, and it would take just a couple of minutes to fill out. Or you can click on the link that I'm going to be putting in the chat, and also that's on the slide. The link will be live for 48 hours, and if you could do that as quickly as possible, we'd really appreciate it. Also, with the survey, when you complete the survey, it will direct you to download a certificate of participation that you could use for your professional portfolio. And as we said at the beginning of the session, you'll be receiving an email with all of the lists of the resources that Sandra shared tonight. So I'm sure that you'll be looking forward to that resource page. We have a whole bunch of upcoming sessions for up until the middle of April. I have them listed. So we'd love you to go and visit the site, and you could register for more sessions. So again, thank you very much, Sandra. That was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording now. And if you have some questions for Sandra, we'll maybe give her a couple of minutes to answer those as well. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Molly, for moderating.
And I'll go back to the feedback slide, so that's accessible for people in the next couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm.